right. Hello, everybody. I got to find a way to transition that so that it doesn't go from George's Rockin' Anthem to just totally cutting off. Let's see if I can keep that going. This is Tyler James, and this is the Comics Launch live stream. And I am excited to dive in. I have a really good topic for creators today and a great guest. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on my guest. My guest today is a comic book writer and the creator of the Kickstarter funded series that include Unicorn Vampire Hunter and Vampire Detective in Space. He's also the creator and organizer behind the Modern Mythology Anthology series and has had a number of other projects fund over on Kickstarter. But he's back on the platform this month with something new. It's called Dragon Grit. It's a fantasy Western with gunslingers and dragon riders, and it's doing really awesome. So welcome back to Comics Launch, Caleb Palmquist. How you doing, Caleb?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on, Tyler.
Yeah, congrats on the new launch. We're going to dive all into it, and I've got a lot of questions and things that I want to ask you about what's going on with this latest. I understand it was a new day one funding record for you, so that's always great to see or support to see there. But I actually want to start with a topic that you brought up in a Substack that you wrote a while back, and you've been putting out some good content over on Substack, and I know leaning into the newsletter. But you did a post on embracing failure, and so there's a lot of things that we can write about, and a lot of things that there's always like what to share, what not to share when it comes to our newsletters. What made you write that newsletter and dive into a topic that a lot of creators don't like to talk about?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a big fan of talking about the things that we don't want to talk about, honestly. And one thing that's like a really sort of almost taboo topic among creators is failure, because I think we all want to sort of present this image of ourselves as that we know what we're doing and that everything is a success and that we're always going to hit no matter what. That's it's not true. I know even for the creators that where it seems like it's true, it's not true. We have missteps. And I guess I just wanted to talk about what that feels like and what the reality of that is. So back in January, I launched a project called The Tiger Who Would Be King. That was a comic book with a collaborator of mine, Dave Swartz, who's drawn a bunch of great comics. And he and I came up with this idea together, and we were very passionate about it, but when we launched, it really just didn't hit with Kickstarter. And of course, we had the loyal day one guys come out, as they always do, which I always really appreciate. And in this case, it just wasn't enough. And we flatlined pretty early, and we were doing the math on what it was going to cost us, and it just wasn't going to be worth it to continue. And it's complicated because I think sometimes when people are starting out, especially, you got to be willing to absorb costs of a project. Like every project can't pay for itself. But I also think, for me, sometimes you got to be realistic about what's worth it and what's hitting with the audience, and asking yourself, is this working? Or do I just want this to work? And I think some creators would tell you, once you've launched a Kickstarter, you're past the point of no return. Like, that's it. Like, you can't go back. You got to commit now. And I don't know if that's true. I mean, ideally, everything that you launch works. Like, that's the perfect world. And obviously you don't want to be known as someone who's constantly like quitting on things. But I also think that, it's a fallacy to say, I've invested some time into this and some money into this, so I have to keep going. I have to keep doing it.
The whole like throwing bad money after good money is not is not a success to right the ship usually, or I think gamblers chasing your losses, and oh, I'm on a bad streak, so I have to spend even more or gamble even more. It can be tough. I mean,
Yeah.
like this is I can see on the one hand, and we've got some people watching the stream live. Again, if one of the benefits of being live is if you have questions for Caleb, please get them in the chat. And I can work them in. It's always fun to make this interactive. And I know that every single person watching this and every single person listening to this, one thing I can absolutely share is they failed at something. Maybe it hasn't been Kickstarter, but it's been something in their life. But I also feel like for a lot of creators, they might think, well, there's the failure part of your career, but once you get to a certain point, well, that's ending. And because obviously you've gotten everything figured out. And I can imagine there might be some people that are like, oh, I haven't even launched my first Kickstarter yet, and I'm afraid of failure. And here's Caleb, who's had a lot of success, had a lot of projects, knows the platform, and to be, a little bit of a veteran and then have a campaign not do as well, or just feel like it missed up, like that might be like, even more scary to it. And I guess I'm a little curious about, like, where do you think for this particular project that it missed the mark? And then also there's like failure of hitting your Kickstarter goal that you set on Kickstarter, but also like, a lot of times we set goals that, hey, I'm setting a goal that I hope I'm going to hit in the first day or first week. But what I actually really want to see is much more. Like, how do some of those things factor in? And like, have you had a chance to sort of like do a debrief with Dave and just analyze, all right, where did we miss the mark, and then what would we have had to happen to have this be a hit?
Well, yeah, definitely Dave and I have had some deep dive conversations about this, because this was a co-created project.
Yeah.
Which is not always how I work. A lot of times, I own the projects and I'm hiring artists. And this is something we came to together, and really there was a certain amount of money that we needed in order to make it worth both of our time.
Yeah.
Which was higher than the $5,000 goal that we set, obviously.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people were like, oh, you're canceling before the end, you probably would make it to 5,000. And I had to say, well, look, I know I set the goal for 5,000, but if that's all I make, then I'm going to lose money on this project. But I mean, there were a few things. One, a lot of people thought this was an all ages book. While it was intended to be enjoyed by all ages, like the moral of the story was that we should eat the billionaires. And I don't think that came across. Also, we had this cinematic landscape thing we were doing that I think wasn't super clear to the audience. I think it was, especially because our story preview here was presented vertically. And there were a number of things that I felt that we weren't quite doing right. Also, to be totally frank, this project, we hadn't done very many actual pages of the book when we launched it because it was co-created. It was like, okay, we want to fund this so that Dave can justify spending his time on it. And so we did some preview images, but not a lot of preview pages, which I think honestly was a mistake. I think that Kickstarters on comics like really benefit from having those story preview pages. So I think that the theme wasn't really clear. Our intention wasn't super clear. The format of the book wasn't super clear. Well, I think the art was beautiful and the story was cool. I think there was just a lot of things that weren't coming across to the audience and that weren't connecting with the audience necessarily.
Yeah.
And certainly Dave and I have talked about how we might revamp it in the future, but that might be a little ways down the line when we can figure out a better angle that might be bigger hit.
Yeah, and I mean, I did the art that's there and the structure of how you presented it, was top notch. So it was a little surprising to me that this thing didn't take off as fast as you would have liked. As you said, statistically, you probably would have funded, but funded and then still, like, one of the worst positions to be in is, well, we funded, but now we're going to be in a big hole and have a lot of work to do. And I'm sure it's also a different calculation entirely when the thing is already done. You've already invested everything into it, and so one way or another, you're not recouping that. It's a different story in terms of, all right, well, we're going to work on this if there's a market for it. And I think both things are valuable. I'll also just point out, Dave is someone you've worked with in the past on a number of projects, and there are a lot of creators out there. I talk to a lot of writers or new writers who are just like, how do I find an artist? Can I get an artist that's willing to collaborate with me? And it's like, it's a hell of a lot easier to find that artist after you've had success working with them on a couple of other projects and establish that relationship, right? Like, but for most, like, I'm sure you've found, and you've worked with a lot of artists, like, how easy is it to find someone that's just like wants a straight up collaboration deal?
Yeah, I will say that at this point in my career, I suppose, I do have several projects in the works that are straight up collaboration deals, but that has come, almost all of those are people I've worked with before. And the ones that aren't are ones who have seen me have a lot of success with other artists who then like are coming to me because they see that I've done that. And I would have never gotten those kind of deals earlier. Yeah. I did want to say that, a couple of notes about my failed campaign. One is that when I was, you're right, it's a sort of a sunk cost thing. I mean, I wasn't sure how long the series was going to be. I had ideas for different lengths of the series, but I knew that it wasn't just one issue. So, and I don't like to leave things unfinished if I can help it. Mm-hmm. Like if I was going to do one issue, and you're right, if you get funded, but you're still going to be in the hole, you're still got to make the project, because if you get funded, people are expecting the book and you got to deliver that book, unless you're just going to refund everyone. And then what was the point in not canceling it?
Yeah. And most of those, I think there's some charges and some things that are just going to get lost anyway.
Yeah, for sure. And then the other thing, and this is, I think, something that I didn't write about in my Substack at the time because I hadn't launched my new campaign yet, but I was definitely told by a number of veteran creators, don't cancel because it looks bad. It's going to be bad for your resume. It's going to be bad for your career on Kickstarter. Well, guess what? The very next launch, record day one number of backers. And so, I mean, I just think that, I mean, part of it is that I was like, look, this isn't working. I'm going to be honest with my audience and say, right now, this isn't working. And maybe we'll return to it. But because I want to serve myself as a creator and I want to serve my audience, I'm going to pivot into something else that I think is going to connect better. And that's what I did.
Yeah. What did you see as like what did you see as the biggest advantages of canceling versus just playing it to the end and potentially failing?
Well, there were a number of advantages. One is I could move on immediately. I could say, okay, I'm going to pivot. I don't have to wait another 2 weeks or whatever in order to determine what's going to happen. And then, it also gave me a measure of certainty, which I wasn't going to have if I was just waiting to see if it would fund. Yeah, I mean, I think those are definitely the big things.
Yeah, it puts you back in the driver's seat, and the a creator, which is what the role that I think most of us want to embrace most, is fundamentally a proactive role. And so to feel like the results are completely out of your hand on this, and to be in that space for another couple of weeks, when all of your experience tells you that this is not going to hit the metrics that your team really needs it to hit. I think there's a really good case to, as you said, to let me take back control of this. And then being upfront and honest with the audience, not trying to put on airs. And actually, I think that's something that by putting out that Substack, by sharing with your Kickstarter backers what the plan is and that you have a plan, I think that goes a long way and, you know, speaks to character. You know, something that, and also like the common wisdom of like a lot of Kickstarter stuff out there that, as you said, like I find most of that is just absolutely bunk, not, you know, isn't borne out by any data or any real, you know, too much common sense, but this like stain of failure that's going to follow you around and you'll wear like a scarlet letter is definitely something that I know a lot of creators are worried about.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, and as you mentioned sort of in your article, like you said, you know, embracing your failures, accepting them, learning from them is usually the way to a path forward. So rather than a stain, it's almost like, you know, a hardening or a toughening or like a lesson learning thing for creators that everybody's going to have to go through. But
oh yeah,
but that's a hard mentality to get to. And I guess, you know, you talked in that article about being hard-headed and being stubborn and fighting against some of that stuff. Like, how did you sort of come around to just to a reframe? Because it can be very easy to get stuck in the mud on stuff like this.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I had also invested a lot of time and a lot of thought into this project that I canceled. So, you know, it certainly wasn't easy to be like, I'm just throwing in the towel. But, you know, I mean, there's two things, I think, two sort of warring, I mean, to be, maybe, cliche about it, you know, you talk about like two wolves, which is like, in this case, like your creative side and the business side.
Yeah.
And those are very important to both be focusing on when you're a comic book creator, as you know, because I'm sure everybody has projects that they would love to do that they also know would not hit with an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I think, I'm trying to, sorry, my brain got frazzled there for a second. Going back to, what was the question?
Well, so I think there's a couple of ways that we can come at this. But, you know, one of the things that is just like an idea, and a lot of these cliches are cliches for a reason, right? But like sometimes they say like success is actually a terrible teacher, or that you will learn more from your failures than for successes. Like I don't 100% buy either of those, because I feel like if all you did was fail, like
Yeah.
it would be very hard to ever learn things. And then also like some of my biggest successes allowed for me to take chances on things or do things that I might not have ever had the confidence to do had I not had those big successes, which then I learned new lessons from. But I think it's a tough thing to always know, you know, is to sort of see the failures as a part of the direction that you're heading in. And but one of the easiest ways to do that, I think, is having multiple projects going on at once and being able to switch gears and switch focus and pivot. And so you were able to do that, you know, in probably record time, compared to a lot of creators, you know. So like how much did having sort of Dragon Grit in the on deck circle maybe make it easier to pull the cancel trigger on the other project and change your focus?
Oh, I mean, it helped a lot. I mean, you're right. I have a lot of things going at one time. I mean, I think as a lot of creators on Kickstarter who are doing big numbers, doing a lot of projects. would tell you, you got to always have something in the chamber. And I'm always thinking 3-4 projects ahead because, things take a long time to materialize and to come into existence. So, I can't spin something up out of nothing usually. Every once in a while, but, so yeah, having this project ready to go was, did help me decide that. And then I have a couple of other projects that are close to getting ready to go. And Dragon Grit was also something that felt like a risk to me. I wasn't sure. It's something, anytime you do something brand new, it's going to be scary.
Yeah.
But I also knew that I could survive failure because it wasn't the first time that I'd had a failed Kickstarter. In fact, the last time I was on your podcast 2 years ago, we talked about my first failed Kickstarter.
Yeah.
I had one of my very early huge successes not long after that failed Kickstarter, with the first Unicorn Vampire Hunter. And so, I did have this in the wings. And then also the other thing was that because we canceled the Tiger Who Would Be King, Dave and I started working on a different project, which is almost certainly going to be more successful, which is going to be my next Kickstarter after this one. That is has to do with my whole vampire universe thing, which is for me a much safer bet at this point, to launch something like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I think it's important to recognize that, like, even the super successful creators out there, like, when they launch new projects, they're going to hit different, and often, like, the bigger the star, the bigger the variance in how those projects do. You look at, like, box office stars, the biggest actors out there, like, they're going to have, millions, in some cases hundreds of millions of dollars in difference in what different projects do. Somebody like Brian Polito, some of his projects, Lady Death stuff, might hit 400 or 500K, but some of the other, like, non-Lady Death stuff might do 200. That's a big difference, right? But we kind of just lump it all as success is success.
I would also encourage anyone to look at, like, if you're thinking about very popular creators that you like, go ahead and look through their profiles, like if they're on Kickstarter, and see how the different projects are doing, because sometimes they'll have something that does, like you said, like way smaller numbers, like someone who does, $50, $60, $70,000 campaigns, then all of a sudden they've got like a $5,000 campaign. Take a look at that and think about, are they making money on that, or are they just absorbing the cost of that? Because either they just have the extra money, or because they don't want to have a failure. And I think your circumstances may vary too. If I was flush with cash enough to have absorbed the costs of the Tiger Who Would Be King, maybe I would have just let it go,
right,
and done it anyway. Unfortunately, I'm not in that kind of a position, but
yeah, I also think it's like there may be strategy or things that we can't see. This is one of the reasons why, and I've taught for a while, like, yes, Kickstarter is probably one of the best platforms in terms of getting ideas from and modeling, but you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg if you're studying somebody's Kickstarter page. You don't know what their costs are behind the scenes. You don't know what kind of financial backing, if any. You don't know what the deals that they have going on. You don't know what they're paying their artist or creative team. And so just monkey see, monkey do can be a recipe for disaster if you're not also doing your research. And then also, like, just publishers in general, I think it's pretty well established that for a lot of publishers, there might only be a small percentage of their titles that fund the entire endeavor. But there might be benefits of having a deeper backlist, or Kickstarter might not have been the perfect platform for the Tiger book, but you could see that being potentially a scholastic superstar or something, or in taught in schools, or taught in,
Right.
there may be other places where it connects more. And the Kickstarter audience, we have to remember, like, it's like primarily like it's dominated, I think, by like 35 to 55.
Yeah.
And it's usually not the first place people are going to find books for their kids.
Yeah, no, that's true.
Yeah. So, but let's talk about this new project, because as we said, and as you said, had a project that was, underperforming, and then this one kind of really got out of the gate really strong for you. So like, tell us a little bit more about Dragon Grip. What are you trying to accomplish here? What's the inspiration behind it, and what's going to be cool about it?
It's a Western. It's a fantasy Western where people ride dragons instead of horses. And it's about Vera, who is an ex-outlaw who now runs packages along star routes out west, delivering on dangerous routes that no one else will take. And then the main crux of the story happens when she takes an escort job, helping a young man escort his dying dragon across the west to a dragon graveyard on foot, while being pursued by a dangerous gang of outlaws. And so if you like Westerns like Tombstone, True Grit, 310 to Yuma, things like that, and if you like dragons and fantasy stories, hopefully this will be good. And then this variant cover is we had a variant cover done by David Hahn, Carl Kiesel, and Ryan Cody, who are basically, they're like the coolest, most like old school famous comic guys that I know.
That are crushing it on Kickstarter when they launch.
Yeah. They got Impossible Jones they're launching, which always kills. Yep. And I was lucky enough to have dinner with Carl last fall, and I told him about the book, and we decided to do a cover together, which was really nice of him.
Yeah.
I think it turned out awesome.
Yeah. And I remember on our last time you were on the comics launch, we talked about the power of a really strong title, a title that, in a few short words gets the concept across, and then having that quick, compelling pitch that even like that comic fans can easily share. Fantasy Western with dragons. Yes. Definitely tightens it up and makes it something that, like, on a platform where there's so much content, I think we're closing in on 300 projects live on Kickstarter right now. The power of pithy is definitely something that goes a long way and takes a while to get there. But
yes,
like when I guess I'm curious a little bit about your process. Like, what came first with this? Like, do you remember the initial germ of the idea, or what was the like, this is a pretty compelling image of your typical Western, a Western heroine on horseback with the fire in her revolver, but a dragon also blasting dragon fire. Was like something like that the first image in your head that sparked it, or did it come from a completely different place?
I'll actually tell you so I co-wrote this with my wife, Lorelei Jonasson, who is a novelist, and we wanted to write something together early on when we were dating. We thought, it'd be fun to write something together, and it started out as just sort of a fun exercise that wasn't necessarily intended, for a wide audience. We were sort of writing a novel together, and we were brainstorming what to write about. And, I've always wanted to write a Western, and she loves dragons and fantasy novels. And so, I was just like, what if the cowboys ride dragons? And so it was originally conceptualized as a novel. And we actually wrote about half of it as a novel, before we kind of had the idea I had the idea. I was like, we could do this as a comic book. I was like, I don't know how to promote a novel, but I know how to promote a comic book. And I also just wanted to see, like you said, this is a very striking image. And that's what I had this image in my mind of this real, tough Clint Eastwood style heroine, just like riding a badass dragon. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it came from. So, just like a writing exercise between my wife and I.
Yeah. What was that like? Just, I mean, there's obviously a lot of, this morning my wife and I have to have a little discussion about whether or not to send our boy to school because there's a bug going around, and so like in marriage, there's all sorts of you know conversations and things that you'll have going, but when it comes to co-creating an entire world, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made. And I'm curious, like, how did you handle back and forth? Is there some area where uh, you know sometimes they say like, all right, it can never be 50-50. There's going to be certain areas where somebody's got to be, it's 51-49, but overall you're hoping that it's an even process. But how did you navigate that? And was this the first time that you guys had done something together like that?
Yes, this is the first time we've written something together. We have worked a little bit on like some D&D campaigns, but I mean, that's like a relatively low pressure thing. But basically, I would say the biggest, like, not even arguments, but like long discussions we had were about the mechanics of the world. My wife is a real like crunchy numbers logic kind of person, and so she had very clear ideas about what the rules of the world were. Like, is there magic, is there not, what kind of supernatural things exist, and then we ended up settling on a world that is mainly not terribly magic. I mean, the dragons are really the most magical thing in it for the most part. There's a few other supernatural elements, but nobody's a wizard in this world. And then the other thing that we did to collaborate was we each kind of had characters that we created and that we sort of fostered. So the main character Vera is very much Lorelai's creation. And then the villain of the piece, his name is Jack, and if you've seen Tombstone, imagine Johnny Ringo, but he rides a dragon. That's kind of who Jack is, and so that's kind of the character that I ended up fostering more, and so we definitely had some long conversations where we debated like what all the little tiny mechanics, like are the oxen in this world also dragons, or are they like bred to be around dragons, or like what exactly, like tiny details that like I don't even know if the audience will necessarily pick up on, but it's definitely gone way more into world building than I ever do on my own stuff.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of that stuff is important, and then where in the Wild West is it, and I think I saw that the concept of the railroad's coming, and if dragons were the primary source of long distance travel or direct, like how is that going to affect it, and you could see where the industry and industry versus dragons, and so that stuff is definitely fun to get into, and can obviously also there's probably a lot that never ends up making it into the book and the series, but if it feels like a world that you're living in. What's the goal for this series in terms of like do you see this being like another staple ongoing that you're hoping for? Are you hoping that this wraps in a short volume and that you return to it down the line? Do you have, or is part of this let's see how the market responds to it?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a certain element of how is the market going to respond to it, but I'll tell you, we wrote a version of this that's 10 issues long. Nice. Which is ambitious. That's more issues than I have of any other book currently. Although I expect I will get to 10 issues on Unicorn Vampire Hunter before I finish 10 issues of this. But we have a very concrete plan, and the artist Kay Woolheiser is awesome. She's dedicated to the book, and the plan was always, if this hits and if it does well, then we are intending to be on Kickstarter 4 times a year with this book.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the artist Kay. What attracted you to her stuff, and how did you get that collaboration going?
Well, I worked with Kay on a book that I did last year called The Tiger. Sorry, not Tiger. The Knight and the Lion.
Yeah.
Which is a King Arthur book, and that's an adaptation of a 13th century Arthurian romance. It's about obviously a knight who fights alongside a lion. And I had been looking for an artist for that book for a while. As you probably know, finding a new artist to work with can be a very daunting task. Even if even if you have some success under your belt, finding someone that you're going to work well with and who has time for your project can be a big deal. And so I reached out to a lot of people. And at that time, Kay was working on a book called A Guardian on Kickstarter, which was a pretty successful book, and it was very beautiful. And I reached out to her sort of thinking that she wouldn't really get back to me. And then she ended up responding to me, and we did this, The Knight and the Lion, and that took about a year to work on together, and it turned out so great. I think it's one of the most beautiful books I've done. And I mean, obviously thanks to her. And so then I had this pitch for her. I said, well, now that we finished The Knight and the Lion, I have this other idea. And she was super excited about it. So, it was definitely, I don't think I would have gotten someone like Kay to agree to like a long ongoing series without having already worked with her before. Because The Knight and the Lion was, I mean, it's a graphic novel, but it's like an 80-page, like once and done graphic novel.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so that's kind of, the relationship started by me just cold messaging her on Facebook, being like, I'm, on Facebook, and I sent an email and I was like, do you want to work together? And then, that's kind of how it went. But to be clear, during that time, I sent messages to probably 25 different artists just to gauge interest. And of those 25, like 5 actually responded to me, and 4 of them, sorry, I should say like 3 of them told me they didn't have time, and then Kay and 1 other artist responded to me and said they were interested. And so it's like, it's like applying for jobs. Like you gotta, it's, you're not everyone's going to respond to you, but sometimes it's worth waiting for that, that great match.
Yeah. And I think that's the important message that I want the creators out there to hear, is that even when you have a lot of projects under your belt, that, there's only so much time in the day, and and most artists that are worth working with have a packed dance card. So persistence, playing the numbers game, a little bit of luck, a little bit of timing, and earning the right to feel like you can ask for bigger things. That's why I'm a big fan of like starting on small projects with people and establish that working relationship. I also know that a good place to look, or to keep your eyes peeled on, and I've talked to a couple creators who like their hack is that they back just about every cool anthology project on Kickstarter, maybe at the digital level, but then they're getting like a Rolodex of work samples from people that are, you assume, somewhat available because they're willing to jump in on these anthologies. And that's just a really cool way to get exposed to a lot of creators in this indie space that are looking for collaborations and partnerships on cool projects. So
that's true. I would also say that, if you see artists who are doing work on Kickstarter at all, you can assume that they are willing to do more work that's going to be on Kickstarter. So, it never hurts to reach out. And like I said, there's many dozens of messages that have been unresponded to by cool artists that I've sent messages to. And plenty where they respond to me and just say, it sounds cool, but I don't have time. And so it's always worth it to reach out.
And that's I guess that's another example of embracing failure, right? It's like knowing that a 20%, like a 5% success rate can ultimately result in a book that looks as beautiful as this, and that gets funded on day one on Kickstarter, and helps you rebound after a project that doesn't go well. Like, well, that's failure. That's a lot of failure that goes into that is a part of the process of getting to this point. So
yeah,
Yeah, Adriano says that rejection is part of the game. Yeah, and I've even seen some artists or creators out there, writers, that like they gamify the rejection. It's like, all right, I'm gonna earn 100, I'm gonna earn 1,000 points this year in my career, and I get a point for every time I solicit an agent, or I get 5 points for every time I get a negative response from a publisher. But just that the fact that they acknowledge me. Yeah, like playing the game and not taking it personally, and not taking a reflection of you. I think that's another thing that I think a lot of creators get wrapped up in, is they put so much effort and so much of themselves into their projects that if the projects don't work out, it's them that is the failure and not the project or the thing that's connecting. But and like, how do you sort of, and then on the flip side is like, oh, this Kickstarter really hit. Does that all of a sudden mean that I am 100% more of the creator than I was 2 weeks ago, or a better human being? Like, how do you sort of keep a healthy distance between you and the project?
I mean, first of all these projects, unless you're writing and drawing everything yourself, it's all a collaborative effort. And, and so you got to know that you're rising together and you're falling together. And also, um, you know, I think what you said is really important, that just because you succeed or fail doesn't determine your value as a creator necessarily. And I will say that one of the reasons I think that the Tiger Who Would Be King failed is because I had started to get the mentality, even though I'm no stranger to failure, I had started to get the mentality that like everything I do is gonna hit. I'm invincible, baby.
Yeah.
And that's just like not true. I mean, no matter how big you are, you have to. I mean, it's like you said, like famous movie directors will have like incredible. I mean, look at M. Night Shyamalan, doing great, doing great, doing great. Avatar: The Last Airbender. You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
it's and so um, I think every single project you gotta be able to look at and be like, what's going to work about this, what's not, and then after it happens, you got to be able to look at that and learn from it. And um and so sometimes you get cocky and that can happen, and sometimes that energy can carry you, but you got to be careful. You got to be careful. And I mean, but another thing I think is very important is that you still have to be willing to take risks. So because I mean, I think if I wasn't willing to step outside of my comfort zone, I literally all I would do is unicorn vampire hunter stuff. It would just be that forever, and I would never stop doing that.
Hmm.
But I knew at the end of last year, as I was preparing for this year and preparing new projects to do, I knew I was going to have to step outside my comfort zone. And the Tiger was part of that, didn't hit. But Dragon was also part of that. I didn't know for sure it would hit. In fact, I had a lot of people tell me Westerns don't work on Kickstarter.
Hmm.
I mean, I knew to a certain degree that wasn't true, because like The Few and Cursed is like a wildly successful fantasy Western comic on Kickstarter.
Yeah.
But I did have people tell me like Westerns aren't going to hit. I also had people tell me that I needed to make Vera a young, hot girl with big chests.
Right.
Yeah. And that otherwise that it wouldn't be appealing to the audience on Kickstarter. I was like, well, I'm going to do a Western anyway, because that's what I care about. That's what I like. And I am going to make my character an older like grizzled outlaw, because that's the kind of character that we want to write. And both of those things sort of turned out to be, I mean, it's hard to say what exactly is the success, like the magic thing that gives something success. But I think that, trusting your gut to a certain degree is important. And also taking risks is important, because this might have been a flop.
Yeah.
People could have been right. Could have been Westerns aren't what people want. Could have been that, older female characters aren't what people want. It seems like that's not true. It seems like people are responding decently well to this.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And, I know another thing that we sort of talked about is just like, the desire to try some new things with campaigns or to level up or to break free. And I think one of the things that really does help is having like a core base of backers and having a series that you're known for, and you've given time to grow and establish a relationship with your audience of someone that can deliver consistently and tell a good story. And I think you have that with Unicorn. But the nice thing about Kickstarter is that gives you a nice starting point and a potential to even potentially exceed it when you launch something new that could potentially appeal to an audience that, who knows, could be broader, could be different, and could be more interesting in. But is there anything else that you're doing with this launch to just to try to reach more people, or to try to give people that maybe haven't given you a or haven't checked out your past work to jump on board this one?
Yeah, I would say that there's a couple of things. That I'm doing. The first one is, this time around, I'm not being shy about promoting my work. Definitely in the past, I have kind of rested on my laurels a little bit, and also kind of like questioned whether or not like the ceaseless self-promotion is worth it, like worth my time, or if it was like cringy or whatever. And this time around, I had the pre-launch page up like over a month before I launched, and I was like shouting it from the rooftops. I've been going on a lot of podcasts and streams and stuff like that. And you know, I think that is making a difference, because you know, in the past, sometimes I've like sort of groused about podcast appearances and other things like that, because I've questioned, like, is it worth it? Like, are people listening to this? Do people care? I mean, your podcast excluded here, Tyler. I expect people are listening today. In fact, I see in the comments that they are. But
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, you go on shows. There's a lot of shows and podcasts and stuff, and you wonder, like, is it worth the hours that I'm putting into this? And I would say ultimately that if someone's willing to spend time interviewing you and having you on their show, then it is worth it if you have the time. Because, you know, it's just showing enthusiasm for what you're doing, and you're wanting to share that with the world. And, you know, I mean, time permitting, some people are very, very busy and they don't have time to be on every little podcast and stream and whatever. This time around, I made time for it. I wanted to do everything that I could within my power that was reasonable. The only thing that I haven't tried is really a lot of paid advertising, just because, to be honest, I haven't cracked it. Curtis Clow and I tried about a month ago. We ran an experiment doing Facebook ads, and we both, at the end of it, we were like, we don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
We spent money for like 10 leads total. You know, it's like, oh, we don't know what we're doing. So that's the one thing I haven't tried, but definitely just like ceaseless self-promotion, you know, is something I'm doing this time that I haven't done before.
Well, that's good. You know, I was in a coaching session a couple of days ago, sort of talking dead zone strategies. And one of the benefits of really getting out there and going on podcasts during the dead zone is it changes your focus from, oh, is my campaign dead? Or let me hit refresh, or should I send that email or should I not? And it's like, let me just go talk to somebody. And in that time that you're talking passionately about your projects and sharing insights and things like that, one thing you're not doing is focusing on how well or not well the Kickstarter is doing on that given day. And that, I think that alone makes it worth the while. And, you know, Ryan Clater is someone that really believes in this, and usually will set up like at least one event or media hit for every day that he's live with a campaign. And he's definitely, you know, shown and tried to and been able to charge. It's like, hey, you know, we don't really ever have complete deadness as a result of just being out there. In terms of Facebook ads, I mean, the landscape of Facebook ads I found has just really, really changed over the past couple of years recently, to the point where like almost all of the advice that was good, really good advice a few years ago is like, yeah, you don't need to do that, or you probably shouldn't do that, or that might actually hurt you because now the algorithm wants to, like, so, you know, when I'm running ads right now, I'm doing almost no targeting, which is
Yeah.
completely different than what I was doing before, because Facebook wants so much data so that their AI driven algorithm can like react to what people actually react to the ads, as opposed to, here, you set up these buckets and try to encourage Facebook to go after just a small bucket. The other thing that I've also found is, and it's tough if you don't have like a bigger series or a bigger backlist or some really premium pledge levels, it's just hard to compete with a lot of people out there that are selling like $1,000 or $1,500 $2,000 products. Like, they can afford to spend $200, $300, $400 per customer, and it's still wildly profitable, and they will do that all day, every day. There's not a lot of like $5 products or $3 products that don't have a big back end upsell funnel associated with it that people successfully can run Facebook ads to. And so, you know, when I'm looking at like, uh, like I'll still run some ads for the comic projects that we run, but it makes a lot more sense when I'm doing it for like the plush toy products, where like the average pledge level is like $150. It's pretty easy to make a return on that by casting a wide net with ads when you're just got one issue of a series that's the main thing that you're focused on. Like, even if you have an ad that's really effective, it might just barely break even, you know.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, you know, another sort of risk with this series is, you know, it's a brand new series, so like you said, like the average pledge is low. Even though I'm at this point, I'm always able to offer, you know, about 4 different complete graphic novels as add-ons. I'm still, you know, the vast majority of backers are just getting the one issue, right? Even if they're getting the fancier collector's edition, they're just getting one issue. So my average pledge is like $22 or something like that, and you know, on obviously when I run a project where it's like the 6th or 7th issue or something, my average pledge is much higher because I have those people like doing the catch up bundles and things like that.
Yeah.
And so, um, yeah, so you know, it's definitely tough. Like I said, this is a record breaking campaign in terms of day one backers, but it was not even close to record breaking in terms of amount raised on day one, because, you know, the pledge is lower. But yeah, I would say that, you know, self-promotion is so important, because one thing that I've done in the past, even on decently successful campaigns, is I've been like, you know, I have my audience, they're gonna follow it, like they're gonna back it. I don't really need to promote. I can just put out a few emails on my email list ahead of time, and then people will sign up. And I've done that, and I think it's hurt me, even though, you know, I've had successful campaigns that way. That's definitely like a you know, resting on my laurels kind of thing. That's not a good idea to do. That's not a growth mindset, you know.
Right. And you know, the absolute numbers on Kickstarter, even though some of these projects really can do phenomenal, but the absolute numbers of total readers compared to, you know, comic book shops or worldwide readers or the English speaking language number of people that read that is so small. And I'm always humbled and reminded of how small my reach actually is when I would do conventions, and I'm like, man, I've been pitching this book for 8 years. I've had this book for 8 years at conventions, and 90% of the people I say, hey, have you heard of the Red 10, or have you heard of Sync? 90% of the people still say no, that are just walking. And these are like not just the broad public, these are comic book fans. And it's like,
Right.
oh, that tells me that there's still a lot of potential market out there, right?
For sure. Yeah.
So yeah, so sitting on your laurels is definitely something that I'd say, especially for a new series where it's a new opportunity to just find that audience and expand even beyond what you existently have. I mean, that's a smart thing. So I'm glad you're filling up your dance card with podcasts and streams and putting more stuff out there. Do you have any? So like, I also like. I feel like Kickstarter is at this point now where it's for most backers, they've played the game. They know how it works now. They know what funding is like. For a lot of creators, comics has the most repeat creators of any category, and so like we're pretty tried and true. Like, where are you in terms of your closing in on double your funding goal? Are closing in on 300 backers? A lot of time left on the clock. Like, are you leaning into stretch goals and playing that game, or do you have some other things that you might unveil throughout the campaign that you're to keep the momentum going or to keep things going, or are you kind of just trying to keep it simple and focus, just like let's get more people to the page?
I do have stretch goals. They are relatively simple. The first stretch goal I put is just like an audio commentary that my wife and I will record and give out to backers, which I think a lot of people really appreciate. It's a value add without adding extra costs. And then I have a trading card we're going to offer, and then some like bonus material, extra pages that'll be added to the book. But I like to keep my stretch goals relatively simple. I don't like to complicate my fulfillment process with a lot of extra stuff added. But mainly I'm just trying to, get more people in. To be honest, my main goal with this campaign is number of backers, because I know I'm not going to reach the same heights in terms of monetary like pledge amount.
Yeah.
Just because it's a new series, but I want to get a lot of backers in here because I think that the story we're writing is really cool. And my hope as a writer is always that someone reads the first issue of something I've written and they're like, damn, that was really cool. I want to read more. I think that's what happened with Unicorn Vampire Hunter. I think I had a lot of success with people coming in with the first issue and really enjoying it. And one of my big keys to success, I think, on that series is I came back like 3 months later with issue 2. Like I fulfilled issue 1, and then I came back really quickly with issue 2. And that's going to be the plan here. Is we should be back in 3 to 4 months. We're gonna get it printed and fulfilled as fast as possible. The book is almost done already, and we want to keep coming back. As soon as the books are in people's hands, we'll be back on Kickstarter with issue 2.
Yeah, keep the momentum going. I like that.
Yeah.
Well, this is great, Caleb. The new project looks awesome. To sort of put a bow on our topic from this morning, for a creator out there that maybe just had what he or she considers a big failure, or whether it be personal, creative, professional, any tips for them on just how to get out of that feeling of failure and into something more productive or positive?
Yeah. I mean, we learn from our failures. If something doesn't work, don't take that as the end, but it is important to learn from it, right? Like look at what happened and analyze it and figure out, what can I take from this to kick even more ass in the future. And I think one thing I see people doing a lot is that they'll have a failed Kickstarter and then they'll relaunch it a couple weeks later, and it will look almost identical. And I think I'm a big fan of relaunching something that didn't work, but I think you really have to look at it and say, what can I do differently? Because failure is only going to teach us lessons if we take lessons from it. If we just ram our head against the wall over and over trying to do the same thing, even though it's not working, then we're not really learning anything. Including like just setting a lower goal. Sometimes people set way too high of a goal, and I think that can be a mistake. But really try to learn from it, but also realize that it's not the end. Like I think While I don't consider myself upper echelon on Kickstarter, I think, there are a lot of creators, like the Stickneys and the Shans of the world that I really look up to, who are doing way better numbers than I am. Still, I think some people look at me and think, I have a lot of success, but uh, I've had 2 failed Kickstarters. And even more than that weren't technically failed, but like honestly were financially failures that I just kept going anyway. And so, it's not the end. If you failed, it's not the end, but if you don't learn from it, you're not going to grow. So really take the time to figure out what you can learn from the failure or the misstep.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think putting yourself out there and sharing, sharing publicly this can actually give you access to some people that, want to talk about it, want to help you make sense of that failure, help you just like, hey, let's get some outside perspective on this, because sometimes, we might be in a position where, hey, I did everything I threw everything that I had at it and it still didn't work. And so sometimes getting that outside perspective can also help. And so I'm glad to see that that you're able to do that and then keep moving forward. And I know that this is, hey, 2024 is still early, man. And I know you've got a lot more in the hopper. So what after Dragon Grit #1 gets funded, what else, anything else you want to plug or tease coming up in this year?
Sure. The very next book is that book that I mentioned earlier on in the podcast with Dave Swartz. We though we may eventually come back to the Tiger book, our next book that is already 100% done is Unicorn versus Vampire Detective, which is the crossover that has been long awaited, which is going to be a lot of fun. And that's going to be like a huge plus size issue that'll launch on Kickstarter about a month after Dragon Grit wraps up. And then we'll have more issues of Dragon Grit. Yeah, I think that's about all I want to tease. We have a whole slate planned out for the rest of the year, but I don't want to put the cart before the horse.
Well, all right. I appreciate you sharing your insight. The book is Dragon Grit over on Kickstarter. It's funded. He's already picked up a few more backers since we've been on live here this morning. So this morning is off to a good start for you. And I'm excited to see more from you this year, Caleb. And I appreciate you. Keep publishing over on Substack. Is that the best place for people that want to connect to you?
Okay, so the best place for people to connect to me is if they go to calebquist.com and sign up for my newsletter, which is a Squarespace newsletter.
Yep.
That's going to be where you're going to learn about my comics. If you want to hear about my thoughts about the industry and about things like failure and things like how I write, then my Substack would be the place to go. I guess the Substack is also a newsletter, but the newsletter that I have all the people on that I update people about my comics is on my website.
Okay. Great.
So, yep.
All right. Yeah. We'll in the show notes for the podcast, we'll link all that stuff up. You got just about a month left to go for Dragon Grit. And I wish you well with this project, Caleb. Thanks for sharing your insights with us.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
All right. And while I have the folks that are watching live here, I will just I also want to give a quick plug to the Comics Tribe project that we have live here. Sync Monsters has 37 hours to go. We're up to 409 backers and hoping to, add a few more before the time runs out. This is a crime horror series with vampires, double-sized issues, 64-page book.
Wow.
Lots of cool covers. We got metal covers. We got lenticular covers. We've got some standard covers at pretty good prices. Trading cards coming with every order. Excited to have another project in the Comics Tribe bin. So if you go to search for Sync over on Kickstarter, you can find that and back it. But otherwise, thanks everybody for tuning in here on Comics Launch Channels. And we can't wait to see what y'all launch next. Take care, everybody.